Rainy season on the African savanna, a lioness lay trapped deep in the mud, her head tightly coiled by a massive African rock python. Her faint roars echoed through the wild like a final cry for help. Then, out of nowhere, an unlikely rescuer appeared. The rainy season had truly arrived on the African savanna. Days of relentless downpours had turned the vast plains into waterlogged swamps. What was once prime hunting ground had become a treacherous mire, hiding deadly traps beneath a blanket of grey mud. The morning air was thick and heavy with moisture. In the distance, sparse acacia trees bent under the weight of the wind. Raindrops slid from their leaves, falling rhythmically onto the mud below, a steady, almost hypnotic sound. But then the stillness was shattered. A raspy roar pierced the air, echoing through the low scrub. At first, it seemed like a stray sound, lost in the rain, but then it came again. Sporadic, muffled by the storm, yet unmistakably laced with desperation. It wasn't the call of a predator on the hunt. It was the cry of something being hunted. Not far off, a fully grown lioness was struggling in the depths of a muddy pit. Her eyes were wide, streaked with rain and grime, thrashing in pure desperation. Her lower body was completely submerged in muck. But what made the scene even more chilling was what was wrapped around her head and neck. A massive African rock python, nearly 20 feet long and thick as a tree trunk. The snake hadn't attacked from beneath like a crocodile or from behind like a hyena. It had been waiting, coiled near the edge of the mire, where heavy-footed prey might stumble in. When the lioness, in pursuit of an antelope, had stepped onto the treacherous ground, the python struck. Its constriction wasn't as swift as a leopard's bite, but it was relentless, tightening inch by inch, with every breath stolen from its victim. A few miles away at a ranger station, Samuel was checking the reserve's bio-monitoring systems. One screen began flashing red, an alert indicating irregular vital signs from a large animal. One of the collared lionesses was in serious trouble. He frowned and fine-tuned the signal range. The surveillance cameras in the western quadrant showed erratic movement, a churning pit of mud, and then, unmistakably, the massive tail of a python whipping through the rain. He didn't need more data. Oh, this was urgent. Samuel grabbed his radio and called it in. "West of Mamba Pit, emergency. Looks like a rock python attacking a lion. We need personnel and extraction gear now." Back at the scene, the struggle continued. The lioness was running out of strength. Her roars had weakened to strained wheezes. The fierce gleam of a predator was gone from her eyes, now clouded with pain and suffocation. Rain poured relentlessly, washing blood and sweat into the thick, sucking mud. Every desperate twitch of her body was met with another brutal squeeze. The python's crushing grip was so strong, not even the sludge could slow it down. It was a simple, deadly technique. Squeeze, hold, wait for the last breath to fade. Samuel was the first to arrive. His truck skidded to a stop on the flooded track. He jumped out, boots sinking ankle-deep into the muck. Raising his binoculars, he saw it all. The dying lioness, the python coiling tighter, preparing for the unthinkable. To swallow a lion whole. In 12 years as a ranger, Samuel had never felt this helpless. He knew that getting too close could trigger the snake, but wait too long and the lioness wouldn't make it. Before Samuel could decide what to do, everything changed in an instant. A deep, thunderous roar echoed across the landscape, nothing like the frail cries from earlier. Samuel whipped around. Emerging from beyond the trees was a massive male lion, his rain-soaked mane giving him the appearance of an ancient warrior. Samuel's instincts screamed at him to run, but the lion didn't even glance his way. Without hesitation, without a single warning roar, the lion charged straight into the mud pit, thundering past Samuel like a force of nature. As his paws struck the muck, earth and water exploded around him, but he didn't slow down. Within seconds, the male lion was face to face with the python. He roared, a fierce, guttural cry of rage. His eyes weren't on the humans. He saw only one thing, his companion, dying. He lunged, baring his fangs, and bit down on the thickest part of the snake's body. The python writhed violently, loosening just enough for the lioness to shift, but the lion didn't stop. He pulled, tore, and shook with feral strength until the snake released its grip and turned its attention toward him. It struck, grazing his shoulder, but the lion held his ground. Samuel watched in awe as blood, he couldn't tell whose, mixed with the muddy water, staining the earth red. The air was filled with growls, splashes, and the dry hiss of thrashing muscle. Finally, the python relented, though not by choice. It slithered back, letting out one last frustrated hiss before disappearing into the brush, leaving behind a battlefield of mud, blood, and silence. But it wasn't over. The lioness was motionless. Samuel signaled the response team to stop 50 feet away. He needed to see how the male would react. If the lion turned on them, the rescue would be over before it began. But the lion did nothing of the sort. What happened next would challenge everything you thought you knew about predators, instincts, and the deep, invisible bonds of the wild. The lion lowered his massive head, gently nudging the lioness's lower jaw with his forehead, lifting it slightly from the mud, as if he understood that just a few more inches and her airway could be blocked for good. Samuel stood frozen. Dr. Miriam arrived moments later. She stepped carefully from the truck, eyes fixed on the lion. He stood protectively, one paw planted firm, head still supporting the lioness. But he didn't roar or charge. His gaze never left her. "We can approach from behind," Miriam whispered. "He knows we're not here to hurt her." They moved swiftly, soft ropes, padded supports, and a light sedative at the ready. Samuel murmured to the team, "Move slow. Don't make eye contact. Don't touch him." When Miriam administered the tranquilizer to the lioness, the male let out a low, rumbling growl. Not a threat, but a warning. Miriam gave a slight nod as if to say, "I know, I'm here to help." The team worked in careful coordination, sliding cushions under her body, looping straps to lift her front from the mud without straining her injured neck. Each time they moved her, the male lion took a half step closer, never taking his eyes off her. It took nearly 20 minutes to pull the lioness free from the mud. Her body was limp, trembling, her fur caked in sludge. But she was still breathing. Samuel exhaled, hope stirring in him for the first time. "Ready for transport," he said. But what shocked everyone wasn't just that they'd saved her. It was what the male lion did next. As they loaded the lioness onto the rescue truck, the male calmly followed, stepping right up to the tailgate. He placed his massive front paws on the edge, as if asking to go with her. Samuel stepped in to block him, but the lion didn't growl, didn't bare his teeth. He just looked, not with the gaze of a predator, but with the eyes of a creature who had made a choice, despite the danger, for one reason only. Her. Dr. Miriam whispered, stunned. "I think we should let him come." "That's not safe," one of the team objected. "Less safe," Samuel countered, "is leaving him behind while she's taken away." After a beat of silence, the team nodded in agreement. They opened the auxiliary cargo bay, larger, open air, with no roof. As the team gently lifted the lioness in, the male climbed in on his own, curling his large frame protectively around her like a living shield of fur and muscle. No growls, no snarls, only the sound of rain. By the time the rescue vehicle emerged from the low trees into the Mbali Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, a modest but vital lifeline in the heart of the savanna, night had fallen. The truck pulled to a stop. Medical staff, suited in protective gear, stepped forward to retrieve the lioness. But before anyone touched the stretcher, the male lion, still lying quietly beside her, rose and moved toward her. No sound, no sudden movement. Just a look, a deep, knowing gaze that Samuel and Dr. Miriam recognized instantly. This wasn't just a wild animal. This was a guardian, a companion, the reason she was still alive. After a pause, Samuel nodded to the medical team. Sigh, let him stay close, but slow. No sudden moves. The team moved with care, lifting the stretcher, guiding it into the recovery room prepped with every vital tool. And with every step they took, the male followed, never more than a few feet away. Inside, monitors were attached to both lions. Heart rate, oxygen levels, IV fluids. The medical team checked for bruising, neck trauma, pupil response, and respiratory function. Mud was gently washed from the lioness's face, revealing a deep contusion along her jaw, the python's final mark. Dr. Miriam kept her eyes on the fluctuating oxygen levels. She still has some reflexes. But if she doesn't stabilize tonight, her system could collapse. All night, the male lion remained by the glass window. They had tried earlier to isolate him in a separate enclosure, but he let out a roar, not wild or aggressive, but something that sounded like a plea, raw and undeniable. He braced his paws against the gate, staring toward the room where she lay. Samuel made the call. Open the pen. Let him stay near. Set up a safety net outside the room. No one else goes in. And he stayed there, all night. The sky was pitch black. A steady drizzle tapped against the roof. The only sounds were the beeping of machines and the lioness's faint, labored breaths, interrupted only by the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the lion outside the glass. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He shifted position only once, from lying down to sitting, when the lioness twitched her paw. No one spoke his name, but within the center, everyone silently agreed. He was no longer an unpredictable male lion. He was something else entirely. At dawn, the lioness opened her eyes. Faint, blurry, but aware. Her oxygen levels began to stabilize. When Dr. Miriam entered the room to check on her, the lioness slowly turned her head toward the glass, where he was waiting. Miriam stood in silence for a moment. Then she smiled and said softly, "She knows he's there." As the lioness began breathing steadily enough to transition from a ventilator to simple oxygen support, an emergency meeting was called at the Mbali Wildlife Rescue Center. Though it was well past working hours, every board member was present. The room was silent, filled only with the faint whistle of wind through the iron window bars and the distant beeps of monitoring equipment outside. On the table lay a detailed report on the 2 rescued lions. An adult lioness nearly strangled to death by a python, and the male who had followed her, from the mud pit to the rescue center, never once leaving her side. 2 questions hung in the air. Could they eventually be returned to the wild? And perhaps just as important, it was time to give them names. Samuel glanced around the table, then spoke quietly. "We've all seen it. They're not just 2 separate animals. If that lioness is alive today, it's because he never gave up. And he's not here by accident. He chose to stay, to be with her. We owe them more than just treatment. We owe them respect." Silence followed. No one disagreed. Everyone in that room had witnessed the bond. Then came a single nod. Then more. No vote was needed. The decision was unanimous. 2 names were entered into the wildlife tracking system that night. The lioness would be called Leona, a symbol of gentle strength and fierce will to survive. The male would be Rex, Latin for king, not just for his commanding presence, but for how he fought and protected with a heart worthy of the title. From that moment on, they were no longer an unidentified lion pair. They were Leona and Rex, a living story of loyalty, devotion, and the kind of miracle only the wild can write. In the days that followed, Leona began to recover. She started eating soft food, her reflexes returned, and though her neck remained swollen, her vital signs improved steadily. And Rex? He never strayed more than 10 feet from the recovery room. Even when fresh meat was placed in an outer pen, he wouldn't eat until Leona had fallen asleep. Dr. Miriam documented everything. What we're seeing here, she wrote, is not simply social behavior or instinct. This is emotional bonding, deep, pure, and so rare it gives science pause. One afternoon, as Leona gained the strength to walk a few paces in the recovery pen, she paused by the window. On the other side of the glass, Rex stood waiting. They pressed their foreheads together, just as he had once lifted her chin from the mud. In the days after the rescue, the Mbali Rescue Center slowly returned to its usual calm. The rains had stopped, dry winds swept across the land, and the savanna began to transform, muddy stretches giving way to sunlit patches of gold-streaked grass. Inside the recovery wing, Leona could now manage several short walks. Though still weak and occasionally stiff from scar tissue near her neck, the fire had returned to her eyes, not the weary glaze of a creature barely clinging to life, but the sharp, steady gaze of one who had stared death down and walked away. Rex, meanwhile, remained nearby. He no longer hovered outside the clinic door, as if sensing that now Leona could stand again, he could allow himself to step back, just a little. But he never truly left, not once. Which is why no one at the center suspected that something terrible was quietly unfolding just beyond the edge of the sanctuary. That morning, like every morning, Rex was led out to the exercise range, a wide, open patch of land designed to help him rebuild muscle and test his mobility. A team of rangers followed at a respectful distance, far enough not to crowd him, close enough to act if needed. No one noticed that near the low western woods, a few odd signs had appeared the day before. Unusually deep tire tracks, missing bird droppings, the faint metallic tang of scorched iron. Subtle clues to the trained eye, signs that traps had been set. By midday, Rex vanished from the ranger's sight for just 15 minutes. Then a roar echoed from the forest's edge. Unlike any territorial call, it was pain. Real, raw pain. Samuel, who had just begun heading back to the station, spun his vehicle around and gunned it toward the sound. He didn't have to look long. There, on the muddy fringe of the woods, Rex lay on his side, one hind leg clamped in an old steel trap. The rusted jaws had sunk deep into the tendon. Blood soaked the dry grass. Each time Rex tried to lift his leg, he roared in agony, but he didn't thrash like a panicked animal. His head stayed high, eyes sharp, watchful, but not afraid. Samuel and his team moved quickly, forming a protective perimeter. No one rushed in. The trap was likely rigged with remote stun devices. Poachers often hid nearby, recording the animal's suffering to sell for profit. Dr. Miriam arrived soon after. She gasped, not in panic, but in urgency. She knew that if the trap wasn't removed within hours, the muscle tissue could necrotize. That leg could be lost. We don't have time. We need to sedate him here and cut it off. Now." A second rescue began. There was no mud, no python, just a more ruthless enemy. Humans. Tranquilizer was administered. Rex resisted at first, but his vision soon blurred. As his body relaxed, Samuel and 2 rangers approached carefully, placing a blindfold to calm him. The trap was removed with specialized bolt cutters. The metallic clack of steel teeth echoed ominously. When the jaws finally sprang open, blood gushed, but the main tendon had held. There was still hope. Dr. Miriam whispered. He held on, just enough. If he'd struggled sooner, we wouldn't have saved the leg. Rex was rushed back to the center. This time, the roles had reversed. Leona was the one waiting. As the rescue vehicle pulled in, she stood at the door of her recovery enclosure, letting out a low growl. Not loud, but unmistakable. A sound of recognition. She'd heard the truck, caught the scent, and knew what was coming. Rex was brought in, hydrated, given antibiotics and pain relief, following protocol, but what silenced the room wasn't the injury. It was Leona. She stepped up to the fence, lowered her head gently toward him. Just days ago, he had stood on that side, watching her breathe weakly. Now it was her turn, and she was right there. Two weeks passed. Rex was healing. His leg remained weak, but strong enough now to support his weight. Leona, by contrast, had made a near-full recovery. Every time Rex walked through his rehab exercises, she followed, just a few paces behind. She would pause when he did, wait, then walk again. No training, no leashes, no commands. Just one truth. They never left each other's side. That morning, the sky was crystal clear. No clouds in sight. Samuel and the ranger team were preparing a special transport. 2 gates were opened, leading to the southern release point of the Mbali Wildlife Reserve. A vast, unfenced expanse where recovered animals were returned to freedom first. Rex and Leona stood at the threshold. Samuel opened the final gate. No one urged them forward. No one called out. They stepped through, together. Leona led by a few steps, head held high. Rex followed close behind, steady now, no longer limping. Both of them moved toward the open savanna, where fresh green grass was beginning to reclaim the land after the rains. A few steps in, they stopped, pausing perhaps, to feel one last time the presence of the humans who had fought for their lives. Then, without a backward glance, they moved on. At the edge of the reserve, an automatic camera captured the final moment. Beneath a brilliant, golden sunset, 2 majestic silhouettes, Leona and Rex, walked side by side, slipping silently out of frame. Their shadows stretched long across the warm red earth, merging with the final light of day, and slowly fading into the boundless horizon. In that moment, there were no voices, no fences, no chains, only freedom, trust, and a bond forged through survival and courage. In a world where the laws of nature seem unbreakable, there is still room for something extraordinary: love. And in the heart of a harsh, unforgiving savanna, 2 wild souls wrote a story that rose above instinct, a story that words can't fully capture, but one the heart will always understand.